I've heard stories about the Duttons.
The fact that you're doing this tells me you haven't heard them all. That's a Dutton way.
Something about Ghost's face in that trailer just doesn't sit right with me. Because the more I watch it, the more convinced I am that Ghost didn't just kill Breeze out of anger or impulse. There was a reason, a calculated, deliberate reason. And I think the Marshals Season 2 trailer has quietly dropped every single clue we need to figure out exactly what that reason was. So today, I'm going to break it all down for you. Let's go back to the moment that stopped everyone cold. Breeze is gone, and Ghost is the one responsible. At first glance, it looks like a brutal, emotional act. Maybe loyalty pushed too far. Maybe a line crossed at the wrong moment. But here's the thing. When you slow the trailer down and look at everything surrounding that moment, the emotional reading starts to fall apart. Because Ghost isn't someone who acts without thinking. Everything we've seen from him up to this point tells us that he calculates, he watches, he waits, and when he finally moves, it's never random. So the question we really need to be asking isn't whether Ghost killed Breeze, it's why. And more importantly, why now? To understand what the trailer is actually telling us, we first need to go back to where Season 1 left things between Ghost and Breeze. Because their relationship heading into the finale was already cracking beneath the surface, even if it wasn't obvious at first. On the outside, Breeze and Ghost looked like they were on the same side. They moved in the same circles, operated under the same structure, and to anyone watching from a distance, they were allies. But there were moments throughout Season 1 where that alliance felt fragile. Small moments, a look that lasted a second too long, a conversation where one of them said just slightly less than the other expected. Those are the kinds of details that easy to miss in the moment, but impossible to ignore once you know how the story ends. And now that we know, it ends with Breeze dead and Ghost standing over that outcome, those small moments hit completely differently. Because it means the tension between them wasn't new. It was building the entire time. Ghost had been watching Breeze for a long time before he ever made his move. And that's what makes this so unsettling. This wasn't heat of the moment. This was the end of something that started much, much earlier. Now, here's where the Season 2 trailer becomes genuinely fascinating. Because rather than showing us the aftermath of Breeze's death in an obvious way, it keeps cutting away at exactly the right moments. You see Ghost's expression, you see the people around him reacting, and then you see something else entirely. Something that at first doesn't seem connected at all. But I think that's exactly the point. The trailer is drawing a line between Ghost's actions and a larger situation that's been quietly developing around him. And it's trusting us to connect those dots ourselves. The first thing I want to point to is the way Ghost carries himself throughout the trailer. There's no panic in him, no sign that he's running from what he did or trying to distance himself from it. If anything, he looks like a man who did something difficult because it needed to be done. And that distinction matters enormously because guilt and certainty look very different on a person. And everything Ghost shows us in that trailer points towards certainty. He made a choice, he stood behind it, and he's prepared for whatever comes next. That is not the behavior of someone who acted in rage. That is the behavior of someone who had already made peace with this decision before he ever carried it out. So what did Breeze do that brought Ghost to that point? That's where I think the evidence in the trailer starts to get really interesting, because there are 2 or 3 scenes scattered across it that, when you look at them together, suggest that Breeze had been operating in a way that put something or someone at serious risk. And I don't think it was accidental. I think Breeze had been making moves that Ghost was aware of, moves that crossed a line Ghost had quietly drawn long before anyone else even noticed there was a line to cross. Think about the people around Ghost in the trailer. Watch how they respond to him after the news about Breeze spreads. Some of them look shaken, yes, but not all of them look surprised. And that difference is everything. Because if this had been a completely unexpected act from Ghost, the shock would be universal. Instead, what we're seeing is a much more mixed reaction. Some people processing grief, some people who look almost like they were waiting for this to happen. And that tells me that Ghost wasn't the only one who knew something was wrong with Breeze. He was just the one willing to act on it. Now, I want to talk about what Breeze may have actually done, because I think the trailer gives us a few possibilities, and I want to walk through each one. The first and most straightforward possibility is betrayal. Breeze may have been passing information to someone outside their circle, someone who had been using that information to get ahead, to cause damage, or to set something in motion that Ghost eventually traced back to him. If that's the case, then Ghost's move wasn't violence for the sake of violence. It was containment. The only way to stop the damage from spreading further was to remove the source. And as cold as that sounds, within the world this show has built, it actually makes complete sense. The second possibility is even more personal, and honestly, I think this one carries more weight when you look at how the trailer is edited. What if Breeze wasn't just passing information to outsiders, but was actively working against someone Ghost was trying to protect? Because if you pay close attention to where certain characters appear in the trailer relative to the moments surrounding Breeze's death, there's a very specific person whose safety seems to be at the center of everything Ghost is doing in Season 2. I'm not going to jump to a conclusion on who that person is just yet, because I want to build this out properly, but keep that thread in mind, because it becomes very important later. The third possibility is power. Breeze may have been positioning himself to take something that Ghost considered untouchable. In organizations like the one this show depicts, loyalty is currency. And when someone starts quietly accumulating influence in ways that weren't sanctioned, that's not just ambition. That's a threat. And threats in this world don't get talked through politely. They get handled. Ghost handling Breeze this way could mean that Breeze had gotten close enough to something that waiting even one more day would have been too late. Now, here's what I find most compelling about all three of these possibilities. They're not necessarily separate from each other. The most believable reading of what the trailer is showing us is that Breeze was doing all of these things at once, feeding information out, moving against someone Ghost cared about, and building his own position in the process. And Ghost, being the kind of person he is, saw all of it happening and let it continue just long enough to be absolutely certain before he did anything about it. That level of patience is what makes Ghost such a dangerous and fascinating character. He doesn't react. He concludes. And once he's concluded, there's no going back. Let me take a moment here to talk about the timing of the kill itself, because I think that's one of the most overlooked clues in everything we've seen from the trailer. Ghost didn't do this in the middle of a conflict or in a moment of chaos where it could be explained away as something that happened in the heat of things. He did it at a moment that felt deliberate, controlled, chosen. And when someone as calculated as Ghost picks a specific moment to act, that moment is never accidental. It means something was happening right then that made the window open. Something that gave him the cover, or the necessity, or the final confirmation he'd been waiting for. I think what happened is that Breeze made his final move right before Ghost made his. Whatever Breeze had been building toward, he either triggered it, attempted to trigger it, or revealed something about his intentions that removed all remaining doubt from Ghost's mind. And Ghost, who had been watching and waiting, recognized that moment for what it was and moved immediately. The window was open and he took it, not out of anger, not out of impulse, but because the evidence was finally complete and the time was exactly right. This is also why I think the people who are blaming Ghost for this, based purely on the surface of what the trailer shows, are missing the deeper story being told here. Yes, what Ghost did is extreme. Yes, it's going to have consequences that ripple through the rest of Season 2 in ways we can't fully predict yet. But the show has never presented Ghost as someone who makes moves without justification. Everything he does is rooted in something. And if the trailer is giving us the clues I think it is, then by the time the full story of what Breeze was actually doing comes to light, a lot of people are going to understand why Ghost acted the way he did. They might not agree with it, but they're going to understand it. Now let's talk about what this means for the rest of Season 2, because the fallout from Breeze's death is clearly going to be one of the central engines driving the whole season forward. And the trailer is already showing us several different directions that fallout could go. The most immediate consequence is going to be the divide it creates. Because even among the people who weren't entirely surprised by what Ghost did, There are going to be those who believe it was necessary and those who believe it was a step too far. And that kind of split, especially within a group that depends on unity to survive, is incredibly dangerous. The people who trusted Breeze, who considered him a friend or an ally, regardless of what he may have been doing behind the scenes, are going to grieve him. And grief has a way of hardening into something much more volatile over time. Ghost is going to have to navigate that reality. He's going to have to hold his position, stay steady, and let the truth about Breeze come out gradually through the events of the season rather than simply announcing it and expecting people to believe him. Because in the world this show operates in, words mean almost nothing. Actions and evidence mean everything. And Ghost knows that, which means Season 2 is going to be a slow, careful process of the audience watching the truth surface piece by piece and watching the people around Ghost slowly shift from doubt toward understanding. But here's the part that I think is going to be the most emotionally difficult to watch, because while Ghost is managing all of that, there's also the matter of the person I mentioned earlier, the one whose safety I believe sits at the very center of why Ghost did what he did. If I'm right about that, then Ghost is carrying something into Season 2 that no one around him fully understands yet. He knows what he was protecting. He knows how close it came to going wrong, and he's going to have to carry that knowledge alone for a while because revealing it too early could put that person at even greater risk. That kind of burden changes a character. It closes them off, makes them seem colder, more unreachable than they already were. And I think Season 2 is going to use that very deliberately to make us question Ghost at exactly the moments when we should be trusting him most. The show is going to push us toward doubt, and then it's going to pull the ground out from under that doubt, and when it does, the payoff is going to be significant. There's one more thing I want to address before we wrap up, and that's the question of whether Breeze's death is actually going to trigger something larger. Because throughout the trailer, there are moments that feel like they're building toward a confrontation that goes well beyond Ghost and the immediate circle around him. The scale of what certain scenes are suggesting feels bigger than a single internal conflict. And if Breeze's death ends up being the thing that sets a much larger sequence of events in motion, then Ghost didn't just make a personal decision. He may have unknowingly, or perhaps very knowingly, started something that's going to define the entire shape of Season 2. I think that's exactly what the show is setting up. Ghost acted to prevent damage, but in doing so, he may have opened a door to something even more dangerous than what Breeze was doing on his own. And watching Ghost reckon with that possibility, watching him realize that removing one problem created 3 more, is going to be one of the most compelling threads of the whole season. Season 2 of Marshals is shaping up to be something genuinely intense. And right at the center of all of it is a man who killed someone he once worked alongside, for reasons that are still unfolding, in a world where the truth always takes its time coming to the surface. Ghost isn't going anywhere. And neither is the weight of what he's done. The only question now is whether what he was protecting was worth the cost. And I think by the end of Season 2, we're going to have our answer. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Ghost had a legitimate reason for killing Breeze, or do you think there's something darker going on that we haven't seen yet? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see more breakdowns like this one, the video on the screen might be exactly what you're looking for.